So recording has started. Please begin when you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Welcome everybody to this is probably going to be the most exciting session of the entire conference. We're talking about Portal's licensing. I'm sure everybody's super excited about that. I just want to do a quick shout out to Arpit for organizing and Raz, and of course you Cheryl as well for doing all the work you guys do, and of course our sponsors. Yeah, putting on events, that's the biggest stress is kind of making sure the catering is paid for and everything like that. So I hope you guys enjoy the lunch today. All right, let's dive in. So a little bit about myself. This is me today, Saturday. It's where I am. Um, and this is going to change. So, anyways, I'm a Power Platform Dynamics 365 specialist, Microsoft MVP for the fifth time. I was awarded last July. I'm also a certified trainer. I'm broadcasting to you today from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It's just turned over noon here, and here's my contact information, and I'll throw my GitHub link up at the end of the session as well. But if you want to reach out to me on any of these channels, it's great. If you're going to reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's okay. Just I always kind of appreciate it. Just give me a little comment saying, "Hey, I saw your session on, the Power Portal Bootcamp or something like that," just so I know where people are coming from. It's kind of helpful. And yeah, so this is today. What's going to happen on Monday morning? I clicked on the link and it clicked my LinkedIn. Anyways, um, what's going to happen on Monday morning? I'm joining Microsoft as a senior content developer. I'm going to be working for the creating content for the Microsoft Docs team. I think specifically around Power Apps portals, but I have a feeling they have a bunch of other stuff for me to do as well. Might be a bit of getting coffee and things like that. But I will be be working here remote. I'm not changing my desk. I'm just changing my position. So I'm looking forward to working within Microsoft as well, and working with folks like Nikita and Dilip and some of the others on the team as well. So again, these links will still be valid, and I still hope to be doing community content presentations like this. So that's the news for me anyway, as of Monday. But I'm still an MVP for one more day. All right. I just want to start off with, we're going to be talking about Power Apps Portals licensing, some caveats. First one, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just giving you the information as it exists today. I know sometimes you start talking about licensing and you can kind of go down some rabbit holes pretty quick. And I also want to specify, I do know a lot about a lot of things, but for Power Apps Portals licensing, I consider myself like an armchair expert, meaning that if you have a project going on and you do have questions about the licensing for a big project or for your own company, definitely engage with the Microsoft sales team, because they know stuff that I don't. They know things that are coming, and I'm going to I'll reiterate this again a little bit later on in the presentation. So definitely when you're doing a portal project of any significance, definitely engage with the sales team or your sales rep, because it could save you or your customers a lot of money and time. Okay, so here's, if you go and do a search on Power Apps Portals licensing or Power Apps licensing, you'll download the licensing guide and you'll see a bunch of different sections. And I'm going to go through some of these sections because when you first look at it, it gets kind of confusing because you have these grids and there's this, there's that, authenticated users, which kind of breaks into external, internal, and unauthenticated users. And what does this all really mean? So when we talk about licensing, we really need to kind of first break down two groups of users, the authenticated versus the anonymous users. So when I say authenticated users, I mean users that are logging into the portal. They'll physically, either using hopefully an external authentication provider like Azure B2C, or, Okta or Facebook or LinkedIn or any of those. Portals does have a mechanism for logging in. However, ideally you should be using an external authentication provider. I know that it kind of hit deprecation status. Doesn't mean it's going away. Deprecated just sort of means, hey, it's not going to be enhanced. So again, those are those authenticated users. And who are those users? Those could be your customers. Those could be your folks that, they don't work for you, but they need to log in. They need to, put in a support ticket, or they need to, renew their membership, or they need to fill out some information. I worked on a portal where they're doing some subsidy applications and, that whole process there. So that's what, those are. Could be members, could be other partners. If you have a, partner channel and you have other of your partners that need to kind of update opportunities, that kind of thing. It could also mean employees, and I do want to circle back onto the employees because sometimes, there's organizations that may use PowerApps portals for something like HR, like you fill in your benefits or something like that. So employees they also count as authenticated users. And then there's the anonymous users. These are people from the general public. So let's say if you have a website that's listing upcoming events for your, if you do rock concert promotions or something like that, the general public. So someone that doesn't necessarily log in, but they will be visiting your portal to get some information from that. So once we kind of got those two groups of people in our head, we now need to consider the licensing scheme. So when we talk about authenticated users, we're going to start talking about logins. And I'm going to talk about the external users that are authenticated but are outside your organization. So folks that are customers, partners, members, they don't work for you. They are not receiving any kind of compensation for doing work for your particular customer. And it's following a per login model, meaning you get to buy so many logins per month. And again, you're reading the pricing guide, you're seeing this and you're like, okay, what does this mean for different capacities, add on tier 2, 3 and logins per month? What does that mean? Does that mean, someone can log in 100 times or, 100 times, or do we have 100 users? And it's kind of hard to when you first look at this, kind of break it down, but let me see if I can, try to do this. So basically, think of the portal login as a 24-hour access to your portal. Think of it like a Disneyland ticket or a ticket to an amusement park. And your boss gives you, or you buy 100 tickets. So you're given that roll of tickets and you go sit in your ticket booth and you have your portal and you have 100 tickets available. And that's why maybe you've bought that allocation of 100 tickets. And each ticket provides 24-hour access to the portal. So if someone comes to your portal, you give them a ticket, and that means they can log in, they can log out as much as they want. So the same as if you go to Disneyland, as long as you have a ticket, you need to go back to your car to maybe get some lunch, or you want to go get a raincoat if you visited Disneyland like I did and it was pouring rain. So you can still go in and out of the park, but within a 24-hour access. And then let's say after that 24-hour access has expired and you want to go in the park, well, you're going to need a new ticket. So even if you're visiting that park, you want to visit it every day in the month, let's say you're going to need the person giving you out those tickets is going to give you 30 tickets out of that 100. So this is where you begin to see it's not necessarily those tickets are per user, it's really per access. So hopefully that clears up that concept a little bit. So let's do a little bit of the math. So we have the portal login, and this is where things sometimes get a bit controversial, or the sticker shock begins to kick in a little bit. We have different tiers here. So let's consider we have an organization that has 1,000 members. And the members we kind of know based on our past and what members do. Let's say they'll access the portal twice a month. They'll go in and renew their membership. Maybe they'll log in the portal to get some information they need to download and that kind of thing. So when you do that math and you realize the logins, you're going to need over the course of the month, if all your members log in, you're going to need 2,000 portal logins. So if we start looking through here, if we did the tier 1 at $200 per unit per month, and that's a unit is those 100 logins, that would you would probably get pretty expensive. So at least there's some tiering. So basically the more logins you buy, the cheaper it gets from a per login perspective. So we need 2,000 portal logins. So if we figure that we have 100 units per month and we have 1,000 logins, we're going to need 20 units. We need 20 units of portal logins. that's going to equal $2,000 per month. So roughly about $1 per login. So $2,000 per month, all right then and there. And this is for a very lightweight kind of membership organization. So if you're already paying, you're probably paying a few $100s for your Dataverse and for your Power Apps user licenses. That can seem a little expensive when you first look at it. And I totally agree. I know I've done some math for some of my clients and it really doesn't make sense. I will provide some other alternatives a little bit later on, but this is sort of how the math works. And this is where people tend to get a little anxious because like, wow, that's a lot of money. And it can be. I'm going to go back to this again later. It really all depends. So we also have this other thing where we talked about the anonymous, and that's the page view model. And again, if we read the guide, we see that we buy with our capacity, we can buy this in 100,000 page views per month. And we mean a page view, typically we mean if we're visiting a page and information displays itself. So again, if we start, going through the math on the anonymous page views, the cost from the site, and this again is going based on US pricing. If you're in a different area, like for me, I'm in Canada, so it's more like $125, I think, right now, or something like that. And that is for 100,000 page views. So if you need, based on your telemetry and your monitoring, you're like, okay, we have people visiting our site, and they're doing more than 100,000 page views, we're going to need more. So if it needs like 500,000 page views, you're looking at around $500 a month for that. And also realize that even for your authenticated users, if they go visit the homepage first or they do some other things on the portal before logging in, you are going to need some page view capacity for that kind of activity as well. So this gets a little bit tricky trying to figure everything out. So at bare minimum, when you're getting licensing for your portals, so if it's a lightweight portal, you're going to need spend $100 or whatever it is in your currency for those 100,000 page views. And then you're going to need to get at least the minimum 100 portal logins, which is $200 if you kind of go with that lowest tier. So you're looking at a bare minimum of $300 per month to license your portal. Now, this is, you look at it at one respect, this is a bit cheaper than some of the older licensing, which was $500 per month for the portal. But again, that is based on very low volume. The other thing to keep in mind when licensing is the Power Platform requests. And each login, so if we're going back to that login model again, you have a daily limit entitlement of 200 Power Platform requests. So this means if you have a portal that's very active in terms of pulling up list view, form data, list views, forums, people entering a lot of information, they can do that roughly 200 times. Now this is pooled as well. So if you have one portal login that maybe only uses 4 Power Platform requests, maybe the next person needs 300, they're okay because you're pooling all those requests together. If it's anonymous page view, they're kind of allocated 3 Power Platform requests per page view. Now, how this is tracked or how this is calculated is still a little bit of a mystery to me. You can get some analytics on that, and I'm hoping that Microsoft over time provides a lot more information on how these things are sort of calculated and what the viewing is. There are some reports available, and we're going to be talking about them in a few minutes as well. But not to all this different level. But again, these are the types of things you just have to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're planning your portal project. Now, sometimes, you run into people and they think, okay, how can we'll cheat the system? Or let's just, you know what, if portal logins cost so much, I just want to deal with page views. And they might come up with their own, like, I'm going to build my own custom authentication. And again, you got to use common sense. UCS is something I like to say. This is definitely, if you're trying to do that to circumvent the licensing, if you know it's wrong, then it is wrong. Now, that being said, there are some legitimate use cases for something like this. This is actually from a project that I've done. I have we need to collect a little bit of information from students. We didn't want to have to go through the students to create contacts for them to go through a whole process. We really just needed to collect a few key pieces of information. So with some, kind of using the GUID and their email combinations and a few other security things, made a very simple, put in your email address, view this information form. We need to collect some information, one and done, in and out. And I also know that there's some projects that were done specifically around the COVID vaccine registrations or the COVID testing that, there were some public sites and they didn't want to have to go through the whole big authentication and setting up a user account and all this process. They really just needed to collect some key information to move forward. So again, using common sense, there's definitely use cases for this. But again, if you're doing it to circumvent your portal licensing, that's really, you're going to get into violation of the licensing, go outside the spirit of the licensing, so to speak. Again, capacity enforcement. What happens if you're sitting in your ticket booth and you've given out 100 tickets and someone, ticket user 101 comes along and, you're 3 weeks into your gig at Disneyland and like, what do you do then? At this point, nothing's going to happen. Those users are still going to be allowed into the portal. Your portal will not shut down. At this point, there's, it is, there is going to be sometimes capacity that it could go, occasional and overage. And according to the licensing guide, when occasional and reasonable overages, they'll be tolerated. I think if you're very much exceeding that capacity, eventually you're going to get some warning messages from Microsoft. Very much like if, if we show of hands here, whose capacity currently is over limit or close to it, you get those red bars when you're looking at the size of your Dataverse. You'll get those warning messages. I assume with Power Apps portals, this will come as well over time as you'll start getting those warnings saying, hey, you've exceeded your login capacity or you've exceeded your view capacity. You need to consider to get some more capacity to your portal. So that's just something, again, to keep in mind with your licensing of your portal. Now, internal users, and there's something about when I mean internal users, I mean people that your company is paying, other employees, contractors that need to log into the portal. So there is some internal use rights for users if you read that. So if they're Dynamics 365, whether they're using the team, operations, or professional, they don't really get anything. But if they're on the enterprise license, they do have access to the portal. If you have the Power Apps per app, you have access to the Power Apps portal. Now, note that it used to be the per app would give you access to 2 apps plus 1 portal. That's changing as of October 1st with the new licensing. Now, the good part is that pricing is dropping to $5 per Power Apps per app. But really, that means if you still need access to a Canvas app or the Outlook, as well as a portal, you're going to need to have like 3 per apps per user. And once you're kind of getting into those numbers, it just makes sense to flip them over and get a per user, which also is dropping in price as well, because so there basically what's happening is if you have that per user license, that means you have unlimited access to Canvas apps, model-driven apps, including access to the portal. If you just have Office 365, then you have no access to the portal. So just to be aware that there is a licensing consideration. And just looking at the questions here, I am going to keep kind of half an eye on the questions as well. Satya is asking, if an organization has 100 user login per month and don't have any page view license, what's happened when the user access the anonymous page? So that would still, I'm not sure if that's being enforced. My understanding, and like I said, I'm an armchair expert, and I believe I have asked this before, this would still count as a page view. So you would start to kind of, because you don't have any page view licensing, I think you still need to spend that $100 to get the page view licensing. So this is just something to be fully aware of. The other thing that could be done too is you could redirect them directly to the login page immediately. And there is a kind of unsupported way to do that as well. I know there's discussions with Dilip about this, so I need to, kind of re-verify, but my understanding, and this is how I kind of license my customers, is like you always need at least that 100 page, those anonymous page views, because a lot of times there is some public information that you want to display. Oh yeah, and so Nikita said portal licensing is not enforced at the time of writing this message. That means it can happen any day now, and that's the thing. I have not. The portal police are not out in force yet, but there will come a day when some of this will be enforced and warnings and whatnot will happen. So a lot of times I will run into a situation where someone's building a power app, a model-driven app, their whole system, but they say, look, we just have employees that are entering a timesheet like once a week or once a month. I don't want to spend, Dynamics 365 licensing for them. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to have create a portal to circumvent all of that, so they can just log into a portal and update that. That is not allowed. That's not a way to circumvent licensing. Your users will still need at minimum, and I mean your internal users, again, people that you're paying, they'll need a Power Apps per app license, and it's $5 per month. And when you're actually in this, sometimes this is where we start looking at alternatives. Consider your use cases, and maybe if you're already spending that $5 and you're implementing a portal, but you already have another system, maybe a Canvas app would work, or even a very simple model-driven app. Again, right tool for the right job. If portals works for your scenario, that's great. But if you're already for your internal users, you're going to need that Power Apps per app license. Maybe give them a Power App to do that. Question about internal users refer to those who can create Power Apps portals. No, internal user licenses mean the folks that are working, so employees. So if you have a company and you have 1,000 employees, and if you create a portal for those employees, they will still need the Power Apps per app license. So hopefully that answers that question. So another question that comes up too, it's like, oh, well, do we have to pay for development portals? Now, here's the thing. Portals, they can be provisioned on a dev instance, a trial and sandbox environments. Not a problem at all. Do realize that these get provisioned as trial portals, so they will go away after 30 days. Now, typically, and I'm not saying it's always the case, but any of these instances I've seen, anybody who's developing or building a portal usually already has at minimum a Power Apps per user license, or they probably should, or they might even have a Dynamics 365 enterprise license. The fact that they have these licenses means that they can access those dev and test portals, and you're still within your licensing rights. So therefore, you can build those portals based on your internal use rights, and have a sandbox or development portal sitting on your sandbox environment where you can do all your configuration, make sure it looks okay, and then move over those configurations from your dev to your production. So you don't necessarily need to buy additional licensing specifically for development portals. The licensing is now based not so much on the portals themselves, but on the users accessing these portals. And I know this is a bit of a change from the way it used to be. Licensing used to be based on a portal. Now it's actually based on the end users themselves. So the question comes up, okay, once I buy my licensing, I'm good to go, right? I can just start building portals. Not quite. What you need to do is you need to actually allocate these licenses. So if you go into Office 365 and you purchase those licenses, or maybe you get them through your partner, who you pay the partner and they allocate them through their CSP. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can buy the licensing. But just to say, you swipe your credit card, you buy some licensing. What happens then is you begin to get your allocation, like your portal page views and your portal logins. And then what you need to do is you need to allocate these to a specific environment. And how you do that, you go into the Power Platform Administration tool. So through make.powerapps.com and click on the little gear icon, or the one I like to do is I go aka.ms/PPAC. This takes me to the Power Platform Administration. You click on the capacity, you go into add-ons, and then there you can apply the page views and the portal login. So you see in my screenshot here, it does say you have to have a minimum of 50,000 here, so I'll plunked in the full 100,000, and then the portal logins, the number of portal logins here. So Therefore, this, this way you can actually get your portal properly licensed. And this is important too, because you can begin to monitor how much your portal is being used. The other thing too is if you want to do things in your portal, like set up a custom domain name, and a few other items, you're going to need that portal to be a production portal. And there's like the trial portal, then there's a production portal. And once you have it kind of licensed there, you can begin to do some of those extra things, like, give it a custom domain name, and those types of things. They don't necessarily have to have the licenses applied to do that work, but I do know that there is, it depends on, at the end of the day, you want to have your portal licensed. Now, viewing allocations, you're probably wondering, okay, how many of all the things, how are they applied? Again, here's another screenshot of the Power Platform Admin Center. And if you go into the capacity on that side tab, this is where if you look at those add-ons, you can manage it from there. So you see there's the portal page views I have allocated in the portal logins. This is for a customer that has, they use their portal a lot, but they have very low kind of number of users accessing it. So for them, it did work out fairly well. I have other customers where it just wouldn't have. And here is where you can see those add-ons, kind of the same place you would look for your AI Builder credits and your app passes and your, those types of things, and, probably PVA and things like that. So you can go into that. You also have the ability there in that same area to manage download reports. So those reports will begin to show you how much your portal is being used. So if I take a look here, you want to make sure whether you're over, you're under, or you just right. So again, you go into that capacity area and you click on the reports, and what it will give you currently is only just the last 30 days. So this is a good thing. Now you do need to do this manually. You need to go in every 30 days. And actually, I think I do have, I'm going to stop my presentation here. I do have this up and running. I'm just going to hit F11, and I have the reports I've run for one customer here. So basically what happens is I can create a new report. If I create that new report, choose what it, AI Builder or portal logins. Let's just, choose portal logins, and I hit submit. And again, it's the last 30 days. So we do that. And this will take maybe a minute or two. It doesn't take too long. And we see here it's in progress. While this one's going, let's look at the one I ran yesterday. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to download it. And what happens is it downloads it as a CSV file using Excel. So you're not going to get a nice Power BI report at this time anyway. What you can do is take this data and make it into a nice report. So let's take a look at this Excel. And here I have the date, I have the portal ID of who logged in. And if I'm just going to do a quick total here on this particular portal, Excel, and I did 44. So out of the 100 portal logins that this particular customer has, they're still good for that month. Like I said, it is a there's a certain amount of people that use this portal, but fairly low concept. So here we can begin to track. And so there basically the question becomes, it's sort of like, okay, how can I predict all of this stuff? And I know that's a great question. And then you might also be in situations where, membership renewals are in March of every year. So do we have to go in and update the, the licensing before and after? In theory, you do, but I think there are sort of things coming to kind of help level that out a little bit. But again, portal licensing is also evolving. This is the system that's in place today. It is on a per month basis. So if you know that you're going to need more capacity, you can add it and then, of course, deallocate it later on if you have more quieter times. Hopefully this becomes a little bit more usable over time. Just going to, now I'm not going to save this, and this will kind of plug away. I'm going to go back to my deck here. Hopefully this picks up. No, it didn't pick up where I left off. So let's just go. Okay, so we talked to there. The other thing to keep note of is if you need more telemetry, you can do that through a support request. So you can do a request and saying, hey, I want to see the last 60 days or 90 days. I'm not exactly sure what the parameters are, what you can and can get, maybe some of those portal allocations. I have not ever had to do this, but again, if I do know that there's more available, and I know that this is also an area that's being worked on, so we have more in the future. We'll hopefully have much better reports, very similar to those other reports that you're seeing in the Power Platform and Minute Center around API limits and that kind of thing. So you can begin to plan and monitor your portal and how well it's being used. Just double checking the questions here. 1,000 company with E3 license, 4,000 who are not licensed. Can I use portal to build the internet? Yes. This will be read only for 5,000 users. Intranet is non-anonymous. Only company employees get this site. Again, I would say just reading the licensing guide, in theory, they would need a Power Apps per app license at, so 5,000 users at $5 a pop. Yeah, that gets to be a quite an expensive proposition. Now, that being said, though, again, I would engage with Microsoft or take a look at some of these other alternatives that I'm going to be presenting later on. That might be they might find a better solution, because that on face value for portals, that would be in a very expensive process. But I think there's some other options there for you. Can we have a particular report about the particular users who are logged in, for example? That is a little bit more tricky in terms of the session ID of, it used to be a little bit more available. There might be something with some of the application insights that you could tie into that. I don't really have some great information on that right now, or some ways to do it, but that's a great question, and maybe some other folks can chime in. I think there were some other presentations on that. I think someone did something on the application insights around portals, but that's definitely a great question. Okay, so let's talk about alternatives. So yes, a couple more questions coming in. Could it possible that we have it work like a consumption plan? No, not yet. Or sorry, I'm not yet. I'm not even sure if that's even a consideration or not. I would agree, Davey, that yes, I would prefer a consumption plan. I'm more of, it's kind of a thing, cable TV versus, your water bill. With cable TV, you're paying, whatever dollar amount per month, but whether you watch TV or not, whereas water, I'm only going to pay for the water I use. I'd rather have a portal bill that's just paying for what I use, but that's not possible right now. And again, I'm not sure if it will be possible in the future or not. Per user license, and your internal users have A3, do they still need per user license? I don't know the breakdown of A3, what that does. I think they would steal, because it's the breakdown of those premium connectors and those types of things with Power Apps. I'd have to break it down. And oh yeah, awesome. Thanks for posting that link about Oliver's App Insights link. Appreciate that. But yeah, about the A3. If it's Power Apps per Office 365, my gut feeling is they don't have access to portals through that. So I think they would actually need the kind of the actual Power Apps, the next tier up. Anyways, just focusing back on the alternatives, because a lot of times what happens is we start talking with portals, and we have your 5,000 user intranet where they're just going to do read only. And you're like, whoa, that's super expensive. You know what? I rather build my portal because I can build a .NET web application, and that points to Dataverse, and I can pull that data out. Or even for that matter, if it's read only, you could do some Power BI reports and look at Power BI licensing, which I'm also not an expert on. That might give the information you need at a Dataverse for your company to view that, and that might be an alternative as well. But sometimes I just want to go back to a story here. Let's say it's around 2008. One of my customers, they needed to have a portal where they had external users needed to go in, and at that time, ADX Studio really wasn't. I mean, they were just sort of starting out. What I did was I did exactly this. I went into Visual Studio. I used to be a much better developer than I am now. I went and I built a .NET web application and hosted that on an IIS server that pointed back to their Dynamics CRM. And it worked well, but it took me probably, I'm guessing, about 6 weeks full time to build that particular web application. Years later, when I started learning Power Apps portals, I thought I would have been able to replicate the functionality of that portal pretty much exactly, including the authentication and the security I needed to build in. And I'm guessing in maybe 1, maybe 2 or 3 days most. So if you're looking at a 6-week development effort, and I know some of you are very talented developers, so you're probably commanding some pretty good rates, or at least you should be, versus working on a portal for 2 or 3 days, you can see there's a cost benefit analysis of using something like Power Apps portals versus, buying, build versus buy. Now, this isn't always the case. Sometimes there are situations where, building something does make sense. Thing is, you got to consider as well is there is an API call capacity for integrating systems, and that can range from 25,000 to 100,000 API calls per 24 hours. And again, that's based on whether you're using the Power Apps per user capacity or whether you have Dynamics 365 Enterprise. And of course, yes, you can buy additional API capacity, but that is something you need to factor in when you're sort of, architecting your solution. Does it make sense to use portals, or does it make sense to build something? And, the answer for pretty much all of my things in terms of Power Portals, it always comes down to it depends. All right. Another alternative, and this again is something that I've done a presentation on. I think it was the if you take a look at in the YouTube channel for the Power Community under, I think it was the MapleSoft last year that Victor was sort of leading the charge on. I did a session on this. I have a blog article as well. I think if you follow that short link, you'll get to it. And this is where there's a process of creating and posting static content dynamically. And I did that with Power Automate. So this is a situation where if it's like if you have an intranet, you just need to display some information on a web page for your 5,000 factory workers, instead of building a whole portal and all of this other stuff. With Power Automate, you can create static HTML pages, and of course you can do retrieve data from Dataverse, and you can have this run on a schedule, whether you're going to run it once an hour or once a day or once a week even. And then with Flow, you'll retrieve your data from Dataverse, you'll format an HTML page, and then you stick it up on something like an Azure static site. And then, it might, of course, I'm not a good designer, but then you can see you have your information directly from Dataverse surfaced on a web page for people to view. And this is kind of going through in terms of licensing, because it's kind of a read-only situation. It can be sort of like the same sort of idea as any kind of reporting or something like that. You could actually develop this a little bit further, that you can do updates through this using the regular Dataverse API, that kind of thing, or even through Flow. With Flow, you could update it back again. I've done that as well. You want to kind of kick in the API management to make sure your things are protected. But this was just another way. The technology is called Jamstack. It's not a product. It's really more of a way of developing static content from live data. And this wasn't my idea. This has been, if you do Jamstack, if you search for that on the web, you'll find tons of articles. And there's another MVP in Australia, John Liu, who did some videos on this as well, taking stuff from SharePoint and displaying it on a web page. So definitely check that out. Another alternative, guest users. So with guest users, you can share Canvas apps with guest users. So if you have an audience or a community and you want to provide them with some sort of functionality or information, instead of building a portal, and again, portal might be the right technology, but the other thing you could do is maybe give them a Canvas app. So let's say if you have like 1,000 users accessing an app every working day. So let's say it's like a time tracking system. Of course, they work for you, so technically they need that Power Apps per app pass at minimum at $5 per app pass. So it's a $5,000 um, or it's a $5,000 fee. Again, let's say external users for some reason they're non-employees. But what buying those passes, that's $5,000, where the equivalent number of portal logins at 70 cents per login. We're going to do some more math because we're on the tiered system because it's a high volume. That still would be $14,000 per month. So when you begin to think about it, and I hate the term, or maybe you've heard the term license-driven development, but this might be a case of where the end users could even get potentially a better experience using a simple Canvas app that they can download on their phone. They have guest access. They can do what they need to do versus having to log into a portal, and it's much more licensing friendly to your organization than portals would, like a third of the cost and a different alternative. Again, it always depends on what your project is. Some other alternatives is, hey, maybe we don't want to use Power Apps portals. We want to use a third-party Dataverse portal. And I've done this before. I'm just actually finishing up a project using the WordPress integration. The reasons were just for the nonprofit. They didn't have a lot of, their budget for IT is for cloud software isn't what it would be to accommodate Power Apps portals for the volume. Their members are logging in every day, quite constantly. So there are other alternatives. So there's things that, considers. It's really sometimes what platform they're on. There is something called the Portal Connector. They're my friends up here in Canada as well. Steve and Ian, they have their company. They've been around for a long time. They have something that's it's more of an integration between Sitefinity and Dataverse. It works for on-prem systems, so that's a whole other conversation there. Definitely there's a cost for their software. It's not free, but it's another thing. There's also another product that I worked with personally and did a lot of beta testing on. It's called the Dataverse integration. It is a WordPress plugin. I'm not the biggest fan of WordPress because it can get a little funky at times, but I do know that WordPress is one of the most used kind of content management systems in the world. So definitely take a look at that Dataverse integration. Again, the pricing I think is around, it's either 100 or 150 per month, and that's really on a subscription for the portal. It's based on the portal, not on the users. Things, and there are other ones as well. There's this one called Externable. I've not tried it. I know someone kind of sent me the link a few days ago on this one. So there are other alternatives. So kind of do your homework. And again, sometimes you might just circle back to Power Apps portals because that makes the most sense for certain things. When you're working with some of these third parties, again, consider those API calls because they got to come from somewhere. They are hitting your Dataverse. So it may be digging into your API capacity. Also consider your own use case. What are you comfortable developing in? If you're a WordPress, junkie and knows WordPress and Twig and PHP inside and out, then maybe something like, Dataverse integration might be a better option based on your skill set as opposed to ramping up on portals. And if you already have existing content management systems, if your project they're already using Sitefinity, maybe it makes sense to use like something like the Portal Connector, for example. Again, I'm not necessarily endorsing these over Power Apps portals. I'm just providing, hey, there are other alternatives out there when you're building your portal projects. Another one as well is doing an integration versus building a portal. So I know sometimes I get pinged by someone saying, hey, we want to build a website. We want to start selling t-shirts, an e-commerce site, for example. And can we do that in Power Apps portals? The answer is, yeah, you could, but would you want to? So like, here's an example of a website where I don't know what their backend is. I think it's Shopify, but let's just say they're using Shopify for this. If they wanted to integrate that information into a Power App or into Dataverse, as opposed to building something on top of Dataverse, whether it's custom or whatever, why didn't we just do an integration? So using either something like, sort of data flows or a logic app or even flows, get that information to, interact with. So something like Shopify, I know there's been folks in the community that have created custom connectors to Shopify. So you could use that on one end, and on the other end of your flow, you could tie that into Dataverse. So this is just an other alternative as you're designing your portals when you're kind of considering those licensing considerations. And again, it depends, and always the right tool for the right job. So if I was to start an e-commerce company, if I want to start selling t-shirts tomorrow, chances are I would not use Power Apps portals. I'd probably sign up for a Shopify account, and then to pump the information that I wanted into my Dataverse, I would just set up some custom connectors, some data flows, or some, just even Power Apps flows, or Power Automate flows rather, and move the information that way. And so third-party connector doesn't incur licensing, multiplex licensing. Yeah, so I know on the portal, that's a great question. On the Portal Connectors website, they have an FAQ where they describe they talk about the multiplexing aspect. You got to remember, the Portal Connector is a certified ISV for Microsoft, so they're definitely not going to be breaking any rules. What about Azure Static Web Site and function combinations as alternatives to portals? Yes, that's kind of the Jamstack method that I've talked about as well. Similar technology. There's always different ways to accommodate what you need. Great alternative. I'm using Microsoft Dynamics Portal and use license per environment. Will the licensing model explained in the session have any impact on it? I think that sounds like you still may be on the old licensing, which is grandfathered. I know that is going away at some point. I don't know the timings on that. So at this point, you are paying per each environment, but that would go away and go to a more user-based, where you wouldn't necessarily have to pay for your dev and test. You can still have them, but your portal usage is based on the users accessing your production portal. And for your dev and test, typically they'll already have Dynamics licenses or Power Apps licenses, which should be able to access those dev and tests. Great questions, by the way. Integration. Well, it's the same if you're integrating into other systems. I don't know there is a certain amount of API calls you do get with integration as part of your system. So if you're tying into other systems like your accounting system or that kind of thing, that's a whole other kind of conversation. There is a certain amount of, how should I say, there is some allowances there for integrations in other systems, because of course, a lot of times, you have your Power Apps or Dynamics CRM and you're tying into another ERP system. So there is some, considerations there for sure. But again, there's it always goes back to great place to ask licensing is engage with sales to make sure that you're legit. Other tip, and I can say this today, maybe I'm not allowed to say this on Monday, but don't pay retail. So who here, if you go into a car lot, if you're buying a car, who pays full price, who pays sticker price for a car? I hope no one does. There's always room for negotiation. Also, there's other promotions, there are incentives going on. So again, engage with your Microsoft sales. If you're an educational or nonprofit, there are special pricing as well for that. So this is sort of my, if anything, find out from Microsoft sales, explain your situation, saying, hey, we have 5,000 people in our factory, but here's what we want to do. And maybe sales will come back and they'll say, hey, well, what about this? And we'll negotiate with you here. So always negotiate. Don't pay retail for Power Apps portals. Again, if you have a small portal where it's like 100, you're having 100 logins and 100,000 page views, like the bare minimum, don't expect any deals there. But once you kind of get into those higher volumes, for sure, definitely have the conversation. The worst they can say is no, but chances are they're going to come back with something that might be a little bit more appealing to your project. Now, what if you have other questions about licensing or specific scenarios? Like I said, I am an armchair expert, but go to the partner community. You should be able to get access to that if you have an MPN. That's a Microsoft Partner Network ID. And then go in there and ask your questions. I know that I think Nikita might have alluded to this, or he might have some other ideas as well, but ask your questions saying, hey, here's our situation. We have this, we have Office 365 licenses. We have these many users. We have contractors that are part-time, but they volunteer their time. What kind of licensing do we need for them? These are the type of questions you can ask here, and I do believe that you will get these questions answered from folks within Microsoft. Or I think there's also some Teams channels, again, through the Microsoft Partner Network. And there are places you can get your licensing, so you're not just sort of flipping in the wind of how to figure out things. There is help out there. Parting thoughts: is Portal's licensing expensive? It can be. I totally think it is, but sometimes you got to do your ROI. So I had this example of a case management. So if you have, let's say, if you have a couple hundred people, or even like a dozen folks working in a call center, logging support cases and that kind of thing. If you set up a customer support portal and you can begin to reduce your headcount by a couple people, the portals begin to pay for themselves pretty quickly. So again, just do the math. And if you're not maybe paying for salaries or even extra equipment, maybe the portals will help you out. Again, it's a cost of business at the end of the day. Also consider the traffic. Of course, we have 1,000. You might have an organization with 1,000 members. Are those 1,000 members really going to be accessing the portal every day? Maybe once you start analyzing your traffic, it's not as busy as you think. It might be a lot lower. So you might not need the level of licensing. You got to realize airlines oversell their seats for a reason. Sometimes it goes over, but a lot of times, if there's a 100-seat plane, they'll sell 120 tickets because they know that there's going to be over 20 people that just don't show up or don't bother. So again, kind of consider these things as you're sort of licensing your portal. And again, I'm just the messenger here. So if you guys have been really good with your questions, again, I didn't make any of this up. I would have probably went with a completely different licensing aspect, more the water bill style, but that's just, they didn't ask me at that time, and I've given my feedback as well on various projects about the different licensing. So again, there's definitely ways to provide feedback, and I know we hate it when they change licensing and they change things, but I'm hoping it will evolve in the right direction. We've already saw Power Apps licensing at the October 1st. They're dropping the price for those core Power App licenses. Maybe portals will come eventually too. I have no idea. I do not know. I'm not involved in any of those discussions. I'm just, again, describing some of this. So I'll leave that for questions. Again, I do want to kind of top this off with thanking the sponsors for the Power Community and 365 Saturday. And again, to Arpit and Raz and Cheryl and everybody else that's helping out. Makes it easy for us speakers. We just have to log in and go on and do our thing. If everything else with them running smoothly, it's great. And again, thank you, the audience. I appreciate you guys, all the feedback and that you're giving, and for reading my blogs and watching my videos. And if you have outstanding questions you sent me, I apologize. I've been way behind on that. I'll try to do my best. So I think we'll turn it over to the questioning. I know Nikita has been, thanks to Nikita for answering a lot of these questions. Really appreciate it too. And yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think actually, Nick, I'm so delighted because you have been addressing all of the questions as they've been popping up, and the ones that you haven't picked up, as you mentioned, Nikita's picked up. So that's been like really helpful into, for what I have to do, just trying to collate everything at the end. It makes it really simple. So thank you so much. And what you were saying about things being made simple for you, actually, I feel that I certainly am basking in your glory. Okay. you come along and you deliver such fantastic content, and you make it all seem so simple, right? I mean, I listen to you now and it all makes perfect sense, and it's so easy and straightforward.
Well, blame it on Arpit, because he asked, I wanted to do something else, and he said, can you do a session on licensing? And I'm like, I don't want to do a session on licensing, but this turned out to be a lot of fun. I hope people enjoyed it, because to me, it's like you read the licensing guide and your eyes glaze over. If you have insomnia, here's another tip. If you have insomnia, download the Power Apps Portals or the Power Apps licensing guide and start reading. You'll be asleep in 3 minutes.
I think I might just stop the recording there, right?
Oh, right. Okay, perfect.
But yeah, I mean, I particularly